So, okay. Good morning, everybody. I see people are now joining us. I am here opening our third webinar. I'm speaking to you from New York, from Rye, New York. And as you know, as I said in my other post before, I am very, very excited to have a very exciting person with us today. Producer Nancy Spielberg, who was so nice. Well, I kind of bothered her to speak at our conference, and after the 13th email, she agreed. And she spoke at my Union League Club, at our Union League Club conference in New York several years ago, and we kept in touch. And I think there's so much to talk about that I pretty much am sure that the next 6 hours will be fine. We'll get through most of it. And maybe what we want to do before we'll start our conversation is maybe start with a trailer of an award-winning production, many awards-winning production of yours, Above and Beyond. Let's do that and start there. Let me just make sure I do it right, which I think I am. Here we are. Very virile and dangerous. I didn't deny my Judaism, but I wasn't happy about being Jewish. What changed me was knowing what Hitler did to the Jews. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do this.
I don't see it.
Desperation time in Palestine, and I said, look, I know there's going to be a war there, and I'm a fighter pilot, and I want to go there.
The 1948 war was the most significant of the Israeli-Arab wars.
Okay, just a second. I'm being told you don't see the webinar?
Right. You don't see the trailer for sure.
I'm sorry?
You
don't see the trailer. Sorry. You were supposed to see the trailer. Just a second. Share screen. Oh, okay. I didn't share. I shared it only with myself. So only I watched the trailer right now. So now I'm going to share it with you as well. Okay, share. Oh, okay. So let me know if you see it right now.
I grew up in an age of very virulent anti-Semitism.
I didn't deny my Judaism, but I wasn't happy about being Jewish. What changed me was knowing what Hitler did to the Jews.
I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do this.
It was desperation time in Palestine, and I said, look, I know there's going to be a war there, and I'm a fighter pilot, and I want to go there.
The 1948 war was the most significant of the Israeli-Arab wars.
It was a matter of life and death.
I was going to help the Jews out. I was going to help my people out.
We landed at Natal, Brazil. Got to Casablanca, Rome. We headed run of the town.
We weren't looking for trouble, but we were always looking for action.
We were young, good looking, had hair. We had a lot of testosterone, and we didn't want to waste it.
The airplane just sunk like this.
We were flying Molotov cocktail.
I knew, that's it. You're going to die. You want to stop us? Shoot us down.
I knew what had happened to other downed pilots, and I wasn't going to be taken prisoner.
I said to the guys, we will never surrender. There will not be another Holocaust.
Maybe God spared us in World War II so that we could help the remnants of our people survive.
I was born to be here in that moment of history.
beautiful.
Thank
You. Thank you for that. So we will obviously we'll be talking about. We'll continue here. Just a second. Sorry about that. Okay. So we will talk about this amazing film soon. Or maybe, you know what, since we just saw it, maybe you can tell us, a couple of words about this film, and then we'll start discussing.
And then we'll talk about my childhood.
Yes.
Above and Beyond was a story that I did not know, and I thought I knew a lot about Israel's history. And it came to me from a total stranger that sent me an email and said, this should be your next movie. And they sent me an obituary of a man named Al Schwimmer. And it talked about how he was this TWA flight engineer. And after World War II, he got involved and got his buddies to volunteer smuggling airplanes out of the United States in 1947, 48, and into Israel at a time when Israel was just declared a state. And the world knew there was going to be a war. The British pulled out, and all the surrounding Arab countries were, ready for attack. And Israel had nothing, not a plane, hardly a gun, hardly a bullet if it had a gun. And so this story of these crazy dudes, they were World War II pilots. They survived the war in fighting for the United States. Why would they go to Israel? Why would they risk their lives? They weren't connected necessarily to their Jewish identity. And it was this insane story. It was like really an Indiana Jones. And I just said, oh my God, why didn't I know that? And I have to tell this story. So I went about, meeting the pilots and hearing their stories, making some gentle recreations, and thank God, capturing their story. And it's a real great American story, which is what I love. It's about these Yankees, that Yankee spirit to help others in need. These guys liberated the camps, and then they see that these survivors are again under attack and facing a potential genocide. So it had all the elements I love, which we can talk about a little later with films, that I do. But this one, just every pilot, they stole my heart. They stole my heart.
Amazing, yeah. And so are other stories that you cover, but we'll get to those soon. So maybe we'll go, and start at the start, really. You grew up in one of the most magical families in history, right? I mean, you should see my Star Wars stuff there, and Spielberg.
George Lucas. Star Wars was not my brother.
No, I know. I'm saying he's in the same world. He was working with Coppola and Lucas, and of course, I grew up on E.T. and John Williams and everything to do with that, which, by the way, always kept the good part, the human soul, the courage in all the films in some way or another, by the way, which is, and in your stories, when you're telling real life stories, you see the same courage, but in real life and very, dangerous situations. So I guess, and you were involved in the films as well, as I know, since you were kids. So there's so much to talk about. I don't even know where to start when your father opened the production company when he was a child. But maybe let's start with how was it to grow at the Spielberg family?
Well, let me take you back to a long, long time ago. Born in New Jersey, and then my family moved out to Arizona in 1957. So, you take this Jewish family from New Jersey, you put them in the middle of the desert. There's not a lot to do. The town Phoenix was really was like Indian reservations.
And why did you move there, by the way?
My father was beginning in the computer world, and the computer world hadn't started. He was one of the founders of some of the early computers and components that he designed. So his job moved the family out there. So, you take this family, and we're 4 kids, and you stick us in the desert, and there's not a lot to do. And in Arizona, in the summertime, it's like 118, so it's not like go out and play because you'll die. So we started to do different things. My brother was the leader of the pack. He ruled. We were too afraid to say no to him, even my mother, and because he would mentally torture us. Physically, he wasn't so tough. But the first thing he started to do was he made films in his Boy Scout troop. So he was a Boy Scout, and he was a scrawny kid. So when they had to earn badges by performing certain feats, with his troupe, he couldn't do them. He had no arm muscles. He couldn't pull himself up, on the chin-up bar. So he had said to his troop leader, his scoutmaster, what if I make a film and I use all of my troop? Can I earn my badge? And thank God that scoutmaster said yes. And Steve made a film with his little Boy Scout friends, made him very popular because everybody wanted to be in it. And he earned his badge. And that sort of set him on the road of making these films with the sisters. We were working it, we were acting, we were lighting, we were script, we were go get me whatever I want whenever I say so. And also before we started to make films, Steve had the idea of renting films and selling tickets to the neighborhood kids. And they would all come to our house in the evenings in the summer when the temperature dropped maybe to 90 instead of 118. And we would hang my parents' bed sheet on the clothesline. And that would be our screen. And we would play movies for the neighborhoods. We'd sell tickets and sell popcorn. And so we became like a local movie house because the kids didn't go to the movies as much as they did later on in years. It was really a treat. And that sort of set us on the path. So my father decided that my brother needed a production company at the ripe age of 15, and he created Playmount Productions. Playmount is the German translation of Spielberg. So Spiel is play and Berg is mountain. So Playmount Productions, and that's sort of how Steve made his early films until he got hired by Universal at the age of 21. And then I took it over, years later and do my films through that. So, we were always storytellers. I think our family, in general, Jewish people are storytellers. I mean, we sit there around the Passover table and then we say, like, the biggest commandment is Magi, this teach your children. We share our heritage, we share our stories like that. And in our family, nothing was black and white. Like everything was like drama and Technicolor. So a trip to the grocery store involved, action scenes and heartbreak and, everything that goes into a story. I used to like to write stories. My sister Ann's a writer. And so we were all telling stories in our own way. And I think that's really where things started. There's just film is another medium for storytelling.
And you're three sisters and one brother?
Yes. So
and you're the youngest.
I'm the baby. I'm the cutest one. No, Steve's the eldest, then Anne. And Annie is also I said she's a screenwriter. So she wrote the movie Big, the one with Tom Hanks, which was her Oscar-nominated film. She's written a lot of stuff, but that was like her biggie. And then my sister Sue, who does promotional marketing, giveaways, and all kinds of stuff. And we used to call her the drama queen of the family. And then me, the baby.
And by the way, it takes, also a good supporting family to do what you guys did. And I know your mother was a really cool, energetic person, right? She had a restaurant. I think I read she danced on the tables.
Don't start spreading that rumor.
Okay. So she was very energetic and positive and...
Oh man, my mom, totally different parents, and they ended up getting divorced, but they ended up also getting sort of back together. So it's a good story. My mother was sort of this energetic elf. We called her Peter Pan. She was not the normal mom, never Betty Crocker style, putting on an apron, cooking dinner like normal people. My family went camping and she dressed very unique style, no social norms with her. She really raised us to follow our own paths. And I think that was very liberating and it was very supportive. And my dad, who's that geeky computer engineer kind of guy, was more the techie side. He was super, super strict about education, which we all disappointed him because at one point or another, each of the children dropped out of college, which was like, the worst thing you could do to my dad. But it's okay. He's very proud of us. And my mom later in life, when she divorced and remarried and moved to Los Angeles, opened a kosher dairy restaurant in Los Angeles, which we are still keeping open. She passed away. So she didn't dance on the tables. She used to dance from table to table. She had this drama about her. She would pirouette and twirl. She never just walked. My mom never just walked a line. So very unique, different angles at parenting. Grateful for both of them. And my dad is 103 now. So
Wow.
he's still cool. He's reading scripts for my brother. On my films, he literally watches rough cuts and tells me what he likes, what he doesn't like.
Wow.
He's my boss.
Wow, amazing. Okay, and then what happened then? Did you help his films, his early films? How did you get into?
Right. So early films, we were acting in them, and that was way back when. As life went on, I was writing more and I was actually wanted to be a veterinarian. So I was studying pre-vet medicine, but I was always writing. From the time I was 8 years old, I was writing. And I kept away from films. I didn't want to go into films, and the bigger my brother got, the more, it intimidating it felt for me to go out there, because I'm not one to ride on his coattails. And I thought, no matter what, you get measured up. And then how could I measure up? I mean, how many Steven Spielbergs can there be? I mean, there are, but that was sort of the mentality. So I stayed away for years. I stayed away. I wrote, I helped people with their scripts, never took the helm, didn't feel comfortable until it just happened, until I finally said, and I did executive produce some films here and there, but more from the background. I never took the lead. Above and Beyond was the first time that I went out and stuck my neck way out there and said, you know what? This is my time. Fear of failure out the door, intimidation out the door. When you have that kind of passion, I think Wendy was talking about the other day, when you have that passion and there are walls, and you're going to see you're going to hit the walls, you're going to find ways around them. And I just sort of said, this is my time.
When was that? How many years ago?
Excuse me?
How many years ago was that change?
Not that long ago. It was about, oh my goodness, it was about 10 years ago that I really, with Above and Beyond. Before that, I had executive produced a documentary called Elusive Justice, The Search for Nazi War Criminals. And it was directed and produced by Jonathan Silvers. And that did very well. It was on PBS. It won awards. But I also didn't want to define myself in the Holocaust world, because Schindler's List had come out, and people tend to push you into an area where they want, help. So it's a whole nother thing. But when Schindler's List came out, and my brother also did the Shoah Oral History Foundation, gathering testimonies from survivors, my phone didn't stop ringing. And it was everybody in the world that either had a story or wanted part of the money that my brother announced on television that he was going to give away, because he refused to keep any profits from Schindler's List. It was blood money, and he said had to go to causes. So trust me, everybody was my best friend all of a sudden who could, can I get a piece of the $25-30 million? So, and because my brother's hard to reach, and I'm accessible in the world, or more so, they came to me. And it took a lot not to go down that rabbit hole of do a Holocaust story, do that, because my interest, as you saw, my first film that I produced was Above and Beyond. It was not really Holocaust, but it was Jewish theme, so it's a little different.
And then I guess it was great. The first film you produced like that won awards, and we'll go there. And just before I go to your exciting projects, last family question. It seems like art has been in your family throughout the generations, right? Your mother played piano, if I'm not mistaken, right? So music was in the air.
Right.
Then obviously you and your brother and everybody. Your daughter, I happen to see what she's doing, and she's an amazing singer.
Oh, yeah. And actor.
And an actor, and I've seen her.
Voice actress, yes. Right.
So it runs in your blood.
Anything, Jessica Katz. I'm not plugging her, really.
No, I'm just asking because I've seen, how in different shapes art is there, whether you like it or not. This is in your blood.
And my other daughter, Melissa Katz, is an incredible artist. And she's really so much about her writing, her equestrian life. But she, at the age of 8, 9, started to film and edit films. And then she started painting and doing graphic design. So yeah, I think a lot of that comes from my husband's side as well, because I think more of the music is from my husband's side, the voice, because my father has a horrible voice. My brother has a horrible voice. I'm okay. My sisters are okay. But I think that, and my husband collects guitars, and he's was always involving the kids with music. You know, they each wanted their guitar. They taught themselves how to play. So it's a mix. You know, it's a good gene mix there we have going.
So
I'll keep the husband even after Corona.
yeah, so that's my next question before we go and talk about the world of films and your projects. Corona, basically everything we're doing, we're talking to amazing, exceptional people from different sectors about how this crisis is affecting them and their industry and how they're coping with it. How do they think it will change the industry going forward? I mean, we spoke with Wendy the other day. Broadway is way more complicated, I think, than the film space.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear how, you know, and again, I spoke with you and I spoke with Wendy, and while I'm speaking to you and Wendy, by the way, both of you, you suddenly both went, sorry about that. And then you see a message that somebody that you know passed away. It's really crazy. So how is it affecting you, your family, and obviously your world, the film industry, as much as you see it, and your projects?
Right. Well, on the personal level, thank God we're all okay. Jessica lives in Tel Aviv. She is over there, and she's all right. And Melissa's in Los Angeles, and she's all right. And they're very careful about social distancing, I'm proud to say. And the interesting thing is, as a mom, the first thing I worried about with Corona was my children have always had a plate of food. I mean, I'm not saying they have great work ethics, but they've never had to forage for berries in the woods. They've never had to search for food. They never had to go to a grocery store and find that there are no eggs or no potatoes. So my concern was, what are their survival skills? How do I teach my children without elbowing some old guy in the side saying, knock that guy over and grab the toilet paper? Like, how do I teach my kids how to survive? And the truth is, I guess I already did, and so did my husband, because they're doing fine. They have toilet paper, they have eggs, and they are making the best of this time in staying productive and not freaking out. So as a mom, that calmed me down. My father is sequestered in his home. He's got incredible nurses. They are keeping him super, secluded. And we are all Zooming, as you know, and Zooming Passover Seders and wine time and whatever we can. So thank God for that. And my husband and I are here in New York, and we are great, and just in this time, I feel so blessed. I know that's crazy, because some people are saying, oh my God, I don't have this and I don't have that. I keep saying, look what we have. Look what we have. And I'm so grateful. So I do feel that this is the great equalizer. Suddenly that Louis Vuitton pair of, boots I don't care. I don't care about the material stuff, not going anywhere, but it just doesn't concern me in the same way. I'm just, praying and hoping for everybody to stay healthy. So that's that piece personally. Just miss my kids terribly, want to get to them. And, so as soon as it's safe, I'm probably out to LA. And as soon as it's safer, I'm out to Israel, or I'm going to bring them in. Regarding the film business, there are few kinds of film business, my kind and my brother's kind. So they are totally different. My brother's filmmaking is theater-based and streaming, but theater-based, big studios, tons of money. That is facing completely different issues, but also deep pockets that have the resources to reinvent. At least for their distribution. As far as production goes, that's a challenge. So there's only so much that you can continue in your production without getting a lot of people on a set together. It's one thing, you can watch on television to have a boom mic on a long stick and have one person there. But, when you're looking at huge productions, there's hundreds of people. My brother just was shooting West Side Story, and we're like all so excited for it, because it was the film we grew up on, and that's supposed to be released December 18th, and God willing it can be. But that was like, we saw him shooting scenes with hundreds of people, with choreographers and makeup people and lighting people and electrical and, and everything. You cannot do that in this environment. They will figure it out. There's a lot of smart people. They will figure it out. And I keep saying, bring back the drive-ins. Let's go sit in our cars. They have great stereo systems, but there's no drive-ins anywhere. And so that's one thing. Independent filmmakers, and specifically documentary filmmakers, which is more my comfort zone right now, is hurting in a different way. It's much more hand to mouth. Raising money is always a struggle. It's not an industry that really you make a lot of money on. Documentaries hardly have that going for them. I'm involved in documentaries because there are stories that are just incredible. So you're driven not by what the marketing department told you is going to sell, t-shirts or box office. You're really driven by the story, the call to action, the educational piece of it. So it is a struggle. I've been in lots of webinars lately with filmmakers trying to say, well, what do we do? I just had a film that was supposed to open in this huge film festival. It would have been my gateway, and there's no film festivals. How do I put a film on the internet and not lose control, which means loss of revenue when things start to lighten up? How do we, move forward? So it is a huge challenge. We are doing a lot of freebie screenings with limited, time slots. Like we'll put up a link with a password which gets changed after a few days, give a window to watch a film, do these webinars, keep people connected. And I'm also very much involved in the educational push. So with one of our films, I think you're going to play the trailer at some point, Who Will Write Our History, we had a very robust festival life, because usually with these documentaries, you have a way you roll them out. You first go to festivals. That's your great audience, Then from festivals, sometimes there are marketing deals, or then you go to educational. And then you work through educational. You're also creating your deals for streaming, for iTunes, Amazon, Netflix, broadcast if you're lucky. You also many times go theatrically earlier, but theatrical is festival, theatrical, and then you go down the line. Theatrical is cost a huge amount of money. When I say huge, it's not huge in the world of my brother's films, but it can, cost you a couple $100,000 you will not recoup. You will do it for awards, like to qualify for awards. You'll do it for reviews, which drives word of mouth. You'll do it to just get the word out also. And then you go down that line. So there's not a lot of revenue in those pieces. Our films are done as not-for-profits, so we take donations, and the expectations of investors is that they've invested in a story that should be shared, keeping our heritage, or creating social change. When we're doing films about anti-Semitism, about tolerance, it's pushing that message out there. So, we sort of have to find what does it mean, investment and return. And the return is sort of a different kind of return, and your name's on the film also, and you get some free screenings, but it is more of a feel good and being involved in archiving and sharing great stories.
And there are some documentaries that are more theatrical, right? This guy, what's his name, that did Super Size Me, right? Isn't he, his films?
Right. If you're Michael Moore, right. Yeah. If you're Michael Moore, if you're Al Gore, if you're guys with like brand recognition names, and you also have the ability to publicize it. Remember, it's PR. Nobody just goes to the theater and watches your film. You got to do a huge push. You have to get the ads out there. You've got to get your PR team. You have to do everything you can to drive people to the theater. And the theater is not going to keep you past a week if you don't start turning tickets. You have to put tushies in the seats. And of course, what's going to happen now is nobody wants to sit next to each other. So can theaters afford to run at 1/3 or 1/2 capacity? And what will that mean? So everybody's wrestling with this and trying to figure out the right formula.
Great. So maybe we'll start to talk about your fascinating stories that you covered and actually how you got to them. So some of them I was like reading on Wikipedia and I said, wow, how did I know that? Maybe we'll start with Who Will Write Our History and see the trailer?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see if I manage to not mess it up this time. Okay. So here we are. I think I got it now. Share. And I'll close my TV. This drops.
Somewhere, years ago, there was a mother who knew that her son was the cleverest, the most talented, the most beautiful. And now the brightest and most beautiful child in the world lies in a strange street. And his name isn't even known.
We should have seen the worst coming. But we did not want to know the truth. We did not want to see it.
Does the world know about our suffering?
Emanuel Ringelblum understood that he had a story to tell, and it was the most important story he would ever have to tell.
Almost all the photography that we have was taken by the German propaganda unit.
Will the Germans write our history, or will we write our history?
Let the witness be our writing.
Their goal was to write the history of the war from the Jewish perspective. And there was no time to lose.
The worst scenario was in the process of happening.
Writing becomes the only recourse. That was the ultimate act of defiance.
You don't really need guns to fight. You could fight with paper and pen.
This is what made this collection of documents so absolutely unique.
One thing is clear to all of us. Our devotion and constant terror have not been in vain.
Among those taken away was Rabbi Ubavit,
Geli 16,
Israel Lichtenstein,
Leib Golden,
Abraham Levin,
Halina,
Emanuel Ringelblum.
Remember, my name is Nahum Gazivich.
I am writing this as a witness.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, I can go on this one for a long time, so you better stop me. It's mostly, so I'll give you a little background of a little bit about the story, how I got involved, and where we are. Roberta Grossman, who directed Above and Beyond for me, when she came to direct Above and Beyond, she had been developing Who Will Write Our History. And she had bought the book rights from Sam Cassow, book by the same name. And it's the story of a group in the Warsaw Ghetto, led by Emanuel Ringelblum, a historian, who basically saw the writing on the wall. And they realized that they would not survive what the Nazis were doing. So they set about writing documents, in eyewitness, in the moment accounts of what the Nazis were doing. And they wrote diaries, and they wrote about life in the Warsaw Ghetto and life and death. So life meant the culture, the music, the arts, there's paintings, and they amassed 60,000 pages of documents and candy wrappers, everything like a time capsule. And they buried all of these documents in tin boxes and milk cans, hoping that somebody from this secret group would survive, and that they would find these documents and they would scream the truth to the world of what the Nazis had done. And after the war, Warsaw Ghetto was complete rubble. 3 people survived. One of them knew where it was buried. Finding it was an incredible task because there was nothing left. You couldn't find a street, but there was a church steeple that was still up, and with aerial maps before the war, and that steeple, they started to dig. And they uncovered the first cache, and then by accident, some construction workers uncovered the second. And it's rare, I'm not gonna tell you more, people have to go see the film. It's very, very rare in all of the documentation of the Holocaust to find anything that was written in that moment. So there is so much raw emotion and anger, because a lot that was written from memory afterwards is a little different. there wasn't an emphasis on talking about the ugly parts, the Judenrat, the Jewish police that turned people in. So, or some of the other things that were just hard to share. Because after the Holocaust, there was really a lot about the survivors and the heroism. So it's really very unique. Some of it is in the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw on display, and it's just incredible. And all of these people really wanted, and they say it, they write their last will and testaments when they're putting them in the boxes, is to be remembered. So it really personalizes the Holocaust. Like, I look at some of these people and the photos and I said, that looks like my friend. And it really brings it home, instead of that 6 million number that we hear and hear and hear, but we start to lose a sense of what does that mean? This puts a face to it. This puts a face, puts a voice. So every word in the film, because it's heavy dramatizations, every word in the film is from the written diaries. So you are hearing their voices after they're gone. So it's really, and today of Corona, of all the things, God forbid, we're not talking about the Warsaw Ghetto, but we are talking about being sequestered in an area where we are in a very minute way struggling to find food or medicine or whatever. It just pales. I almost don't even want to bring up that comparison. But if it gives us any sense of what it is like to be restricted, we who grew up not in wartime, our generation doesn't know what it was like during World War II and what our parents maybe went through and having shortages. We don't know. It's a really good eye-opener, a good eye-opener.
Amazing. And another film, maybe we wanted to watch that trailer as well.
Wait 1 second before you do that. Let me just tell you that this film, just because this was really a cool thing and it was bigger than the little people behind it. I feel like the Wizard of Oz, how it's the little man behind the curtain. Our distributors of Brahmarama, they came up with an idea. They said, you need to do a global simultaneous screening of this film on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And we went out, and UNESCO and World Jewish Congress partnered with us. And not this last January, but January before, we connected with over 55 countries, 14 languages, over 360 screenings of this film on the same day, with conversations between Auschwitz and UNESCO, where we were in Paris, and United States Holocaust Museum and Yad Vashem. And we just had this whole dialogue, because anti-Semitism is on the rise and it's just so necessary. And now we are doing a big educational push. In fact, we are raising money to give the film for free to schools. So we're doing something for like 4,000 schools with study guides, with basic history. That's the point. The point is, this is how we will teach our kids, is not through history books. They do not want to pick up a book. So we need to give them we need visual tools that really engage. So that's what we're hoping to do. Okay, now we can move on.
Especially these days when you see, whether it's the administration or whatever it causes, but you saw more anti-Semitism in the last several years in the United States as well.
Yes.
So I guess this is even more important. Before I'll jump to the film, I wanted to talk about Elsie Perry, because we have, if you see here, Harry Bloomfield, our friend. It's one stadium. It's a very famous stadium. It's not a basketball stadium.
Of course I know Bloomfield Stadium.
But it reminded me, the stadium, hey, we should talk about Elsie Perry in a second. But before that, since you're talking about the Holocaust, another person I read about yesterday, thanks to you, is Vishniak, right? The famous photographer that, you can tell us about that, of the poor. He took pictures of the poor Jewish people, basically several years before the Holocaust, right?
Right. So let me tell you a little, and then maybe you have the trailer. Maybe you'll play the trailer. This is in production, so this isn't ready yet. And thankfully, we filmed most, but not all. So we still have a lot of work to do. But Roman Vishniak was a Russian photographer who was sent by the JDC, the Joint Distribution Committee, the American Jewish Distribution Committee, to Eastern Europe to photograph the Jewish communities that lived in like extreme poverty, bring those photos back to the US, and help raise money to help Jews everywhere in the world. So little did he or anyone realize that the photographs that he took would be the last proof of a civilization that 9-10 years later was literally obliterated. And he's a very interesting man. He also was a scientist, and he did a lot with his photographs. And many of us have the book Vanished World, and incredible photos. Again, like Who Wrote Our History, it personalizes the victims of the Holocaust. You find empathy when you can connect to the victim, not with the number, and when you see the faces and these photos, and they're beautiful. It does that. So we interviewed Mara Vishniak, Roman's daughter, and she was 94. She passed away last year, and she has granted us access to everything. And a lot of his photographs and negatives, including some naked pictures of his mistress, have never been seen before. So we are putting that together, and that's our newest production. Laura Bialis is the director. She did Rock in the Red Zone and the film Refusnik. Roberta Grossman's producing it. I'm executive producing it. Sophie Sartain, who wrote Above and Beyond, is writing it. It's a happy family. So it's, again, going to be one of those really powerful, powerful films. And thankfully, the National Endowment for Humanities did give us a wonderful grant. So we're close to getting most of our budget in. We have a little more to do, and which is always a challenge. But, I think when you have $1 million and you need 200,000, that's not so difficult, because the NEH is like that gold stamp of approval. So I think with God's help, we'll get there. So maybe you'll just play a little bit of the trailer, the teaser.
Yeah, and you can tell me when to stop. And by the way, if people want to get involved in those productions, they can contact you, they can go on the website.
Best thing probably is just email Nancy Spielberg at playmountproductions.com. And, and I can just talk to them, tell them what's involved.
Sure. So, okay, let's do this now.
I was young. Once upon a time. I would watch the images that we know now emerge dark areas first. So there was this suspense about what that image would be. I remember he saying, they're our family and we have to help. If only people could meet these people, it might be possible to still save some of them. His camera was like suspenders. He was never without them. We were Jewish kids in Berlin. I was being photographed a lot, which I hated. Yeah, I'm here with a Hitler poster. It has the usual slogan. We're fighting for peace and equality. We are so lucky compared to the millions of people that didn't get out of Europe. Nobody had time to feel lost. I mean, he had to survive. And he had his camera.
Roman Vizniak has been called one of the few true Renaissance men of our...
Yeah, so it goes. Should we continue with that?
No, that's fine. You get a sense. It just was going to go into his microscopic photography, which became the slides in the movies that when I was a kid, they showed in my science class. you know, that he sort of made the unknown world, the unseen world seen because of the microscopic stuff. So, anyway, that you have to wait for probably for another year and a half. Let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to show, speaking of Bloomfield here, Harry, this is for you, a different kind of stadium and another fascinating story about Ossie Perry. So maybe I'll show the trailer.
Yeah. It's a great trailer.
So check this out. Okay.
Basketball was the #1 topic in Israel.
When I got there, I was really surprised because inside me, I realized that we had a chance to do something.
Maccabi Tel Aviv playing for the European Cup Championship? Are you kidding me? Who are these guys?
It wasn't that long after the war. The country was starving for something that lifted the country.
Moshe Dayan was the most recognizable face in the world except for Muhammad Ali. He was at every one of our games and shaking our hands, and afterwards the battle begins.
Moshe Dayan coming to shake the other team's hand is an intimidation.
For the Russian team, they knew that they had the best team in Europe that beat the American team in the Olympics.
Red Army Moscow had all of the great players from the national team. Maccabi carried the hopes of a nation.
My first thought was, damn.
There was no reason to expect Maccabi could beat Red Army Moscow.
Yes, Perry.
The streets were empty. You couldn't get a taxi. Nothing moved. The excitement was just too much. I wanted more.
There are some things that are more important than sport.
It is easily one of the greatest sporting accomplishments ever.
I put the wrong trailer of another great film, but now I got the right one. Shall we jump to that one?
Yeah, do that, and then we'll talk about both together.
Where do I start my story? When I was 13 and a half, games were all the way across. I only could stay 2 blocks, and no blocks there.
Basketball was his way out of the ghetto.
I was young. I knew that he loved me, but I knew that he loved basketball too.
I saw him play. I said, I want you to come over to play in Israel.
Where?
Ossie Perry was Michael Jordan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar rolled into one. He turns himself and his team into the kings of Europe.
The moment he looked at her, that was it. I think it was love at first sight.
She was the big European model, one of the top 10, and he was the basketball superstar.
It was a phenomenon in the late 70s.
Tammy wasn't sure she would marry him. They were the first mixed couple. She was Jewish and he wasn't.
But all the joy and excitement inside it was a dead feeling. I started to take a lot of pain pills.
He was in Tommy's apartment. He wasn't really moving. She was scared he was dead.
He was different. Cuckoo. Different.
I always knew one thing, that I wanted to tell you my story the way it is.
Fascinating. How did that come to be?
Wait, do you have me on mute?
I'm sorry?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, first of all, Donnie Menken had made...
Sorry.
Somebody wrote it.
There you go. Sorry.
Okay. Donnie Menken, the director of On the Map, had made an Israeli version. And he was playing it in film festivals when I was in Above and Beyond. So, you're sort of always checking out who the competition is in the film festivals, who's opening night, who's closing, the big times. And so he wanted to reach out because he wanted to do more with On the Map. And Roberta and I met him and looked at the film and said, you're right. This is not a story that belongs just in Israel. This is, again, that piece of Americans and Israelis coming together in a cooperative effort to beat the Russians, the bad guys, And Israel had not a chance. Basketball, like their team was horrible in the 70s, and they didn't have a chance in the European Championship. But Tal Brody, who came from Newark, New Jersey, and Ossie Perry, who also he was cut from the Knicks at the last minute, went to Israel. They brought the team to the European Championship. It was a huge moment for Israel. It raised the collective spirit of the whole country. That still in 1977 was still struggling with what happened at the Yom Kippur War and a lot of things going on in Israel at that time. So it's a real great David and Goliath story. It's Miracle on ice, but on the basketball field. So when Donnie and I also, and Roberta, we partnered on that and took that film, and that's out everywhere. I think you can find it on streaming services. I'm sorry, I'm not even prepared, but someone can email me. That's just a great feel good, sharing that also with young people, because it's a wonderful story that's On the Map. Then Donnie was filming Ossie Perry separately all through the time he was filming On the Map, because he idolized him. And Ossie was the superstar in Israel. And his girlfriend was the top model in Israel. And they were a mixed race couple. And that was a huge thing in the 70s. And Ossie, fell from grace. Basketball saved him, and then drugs put him down under. And he was arrested for dealing and thrown into prison. And then he has this redemptive time. And at one point decided he wanted to meet the daughter that he fathered but never met, and decided to do the right thing. So part of that's through this film, and Israel embraces him. He converted to Judaism. He now lives back in Israel. It's such a wonderful story, and it's a story also of a real, who we are. We make mistakes, and how do we atone? How do we come back from those mistakes to do the right things in life? So that's a wonderful message. And again, sports films connect with kids. And if we can teach those lessons, that's how we should do it. So that's sort of where we went. And Donnie Menken is the director, producer, along with Yonatan Nir did Picture of His Life. So it's part of the same crowd. We're sort of like an extended family. Sometimes this one's editing, sometimes that one's directing, and we get together for different projects.
Got it. By the way, guys, I meant for you to see that I was looking for the trailer while the other trailer was going on. It was all on purpose. It's part of my thing. No, I'm kidding. I'm learning the tools, guys. I just started a week ago. You're a
quick learner, Denny. By the way, every time I say Denny, I'm expecting my friend Denny Kauki from Istanbul, who is the only Denny I knew before you. So hi, Denny from Istanbul also.
And so we spoke about some of the, by the way, is there any film that you're really emotional about, and that's your thing that
you mean of mine or in general?
Yes. Well, you know what, of yours, and you know what, I would love to know what's your favorite film in general, and what's your favorite Spielberg film.
Okay, so Above and Beyond has my heart, because I got so close to those pilots. Each and every one was like my father, and everyone but two have left us from that group. So it was, to me, a moment where they were able, most of them saw the film and were, had that moment in the limelight where their communities respected them and applauded them, and their grandchildren and their children was like, wow, we're so proud. So they went out as stars. And so I'm very connected to them and their families. So that's my favorite. And of my brothers, I have to say Schindler's List. And if not Schindler's List, it would be E.T. because who doesn't love E.T.? You know, and I love the lighthearted stuff. You wouldn't know that, right? Because let's see, it's a Holocaust film. But I do love E.T. changed all of us. You know, we were brought up that aliens could be benevolent. You don't have to think of aliens as they came from outer space, Mars, they're going to attack us and kill us and take over our bodies and brains. They could be nice guys, you know? So I loved that feeling. We all wanted an E.T., we all wanted that buddy. And oh gosh, most of my favorite films are some of the classics. You know, I love West Side Story. I love Pride and Prejudice. I love stupid stuff. I love Bridesmaids. I love stupid things too. So it depends on your mood. So I got a long list. I won't share them all right now.
But it's and by the way, most of your brother's films, if not all, I mean, I can sing each and every soundtrack of John Williams. And by the way, you know what's amazing? That John Williams, that does a particular kind of music, when he went to study Schindler's List, he came up with a Jewish tune that you would have swore it was written. And I know he did Fiddler on the Roof back in the day, John Williams.
I think he was involved in part of it.
Involved in the production. He was doing the arrangements, of course. Not he didn't write it. But then Schindler's List, it's so Jewish. He managed. Is a genius, like your brother, in a different space. And the fact he managed to bring the Jewish emotions, and you know, as if he was there. It's unbelievable. And he won an Oscar.
Yeah, he is a kind soul. And I think that kind of kindness opens itself up to understand what makes other people, you know, tick. So maybe that's why. It's funny, I spoke to him when I was looking to score Above and Beyond. He's one of the first guys I got on the phone with, which is one of the advantages to having my brother, is that I can actually get in touch and talk to these people. And we just, you know, he shared ideas with me. Which were wonderful, and I ended up going with Hans Zimmer's group. I could never afford Johnny Williams. I mean, you know, these are low budget. My docs are $1.5 million. At, you know, that's like usually our budget, $1.5 million to $2 million if we're spending a lot of money. But every little penny has to be weighed. So you cannot take an orchestra like Johnny. You know, he conducts in front of a live orchestra. Each of those people has to be paid. Not everybody does stuff for free, even though I'm always schnorring. I'm always trying to get it for free, but not always getting it. So ended up having Hans Zimmer's partner, who I'll just tell you this quick story, and then we'll go back to OC and On the Map. I called him out of the blue. My husband had met Hans Zimmer's partner in synagogue in Malibu. And I don't know, I had his contact and I called him out of the blue and I said, "Hi, this is Nancy Katz." Like I didn't even say Spielberg. And he went, "Well, you know, I don't know what you want, but I'm in London right now having lunch. So could you just email me?" So I emailed him and I said, "Well, I'm doing this film about these volunteer pilots, blah, blah, blah." And he emails me back 2 words, "Call me." And I call him back and he said, "You don't get it. My uncle and my father from South Africa went to Israel in 1948 and volunteered for the Israeli Air Force. What do you want?" And that, like, and he did most of it, like hardly charged me a penny. So I got a really good score because I hit the right buttons. You know, you just got to pull on the right heartstring. But anyway, so we should talk, because I know Harry's probably more interested in OC and On the Map. But, you know, Harry may know those guys also.
Definitely. And I know you're working on a Jewish film fund.
Yes.
And that's something we haven't talked about. So
right.
If you can tell us what's going on there and how is it going?
So quickly, it is in very early stages, which means we're sort of like sussing out what the needs are. But raising money for films, for documentary films, is hard. Mostly when your name is Spielberg, but it is really hard. And mostly now it's going to be tougher because the immediate needs we, you know, run to whenever there is any kind of catastrophe in the world, we run to those, you know, whether it's Sandy or what happened, you know, in New Orleans, or, you know, and now we are trying to help all of those that are affected by Corona. But in the same way that in the Warsaw Ghetto and Who Will Write Our History, that culture was a part of their survival. There's food, water, culture. You cannot live without your music and without your arts. It is what makes us want to live. It's what separates us from the animals. And so raising money for films is difficult. Preserving Jewish stories is like my number one goal. Otherwise, I'm going to stay home, stay in bed, and eat bonbons. I mean, I don't do this for my health, but it is about preserving the Jewish stories and also just great human stories. And many, many wonderful stories are not told because filmmakers don't have the funds. Even if they've had successes, every time you have to go back, every time, and raise more money. They don't know how to distribute. Maybe they need help with their creative. Maybe they've got a good kernel, but because, sometimes I say that Jewish audiences will watch anything Jewish, even if it sucks. And that shouldn't be the case. We have some wonderful, wonderful films and products coming out of Israel these days. We really have incredible stuff. So what we want to do is create a very large fund. We'll start raising the first 30 something million, and we'll probably go up to 100 and then create an endowment and have a team where we will choose the films, the filmmakers, the stories, and help them from A to Z. Help them through development, through production, through distribution, which is one of the hardest things and takes another chunk of money, and get them not just get pregnant, but give birth and teach the child how to walk. So that's sort of our plan. It will take a while, and I'm working with some of the larger foundations, but again, we're doing it very carefully, so it won't be out the door tomorrow. But we all need it. All the filmmakers need that kind of tool.
And you are involved in philanthropy. I don't know if you talk about that too much, but you can share. I mean, I know you've been doing it for years.
Yeah. Well, we have that. We all need to give back. Most of my charities have been children-based. We were involved in Children of Chernobyl, a Chabad organization that was the only organization that was evacuating kids from the Chernobyl region permanently, not taking them to summer camp and then sending them back, but giving them a chance at life. And we evacuated almost 3,000 children. And then to see these kids, and they went to Israel. Israel was the only place that would take them. To see them survive, marry, have children, give back to society is like, that's the icing on the cake. But most of it is around children, sick children, Project Sunshine. We've also been involved with Jerusalem Academy of Music and Dance, and lots of other ones. I love Moishi House, which is another organization, which is Jewish young adults living together and creating Jewish programming, and Moishi House helps them with their rents. My daughter lives in one in LA. We show our films there, so we sort of keep the Jewish communities engaged, because it's sort of tough with the younger generations to understand what your heritage is, to want to hold on to some of your roots.
That's great. And I have some questions here. Let's see one of them. Everybody says they love the traders. If you see value in sharing Jewish stories, also focusing on the lives of individuals who perished in the Holocaust during the pre-Holocaust period, when they were simply living their lives as people not so different from us before they perished, and how the anti-Semitism took over. In other words, focusing on the normality of life and how it changed so dramatically and relatively quickly.
Right. Well, Vishniak is a little bit about that in some ways, because Vishniak, we started his life, he lived in Russia, then he lived in Berlin, he escaped to America, and he shows the other side of that vibrant life. In the same way, in the beginning of Who Will Write Our History, you will see vibrant life in Warsaw. I mean, it was a huge Jewish community, and they're out with their baby, their prams, and they're having tea at the tables, cafes, outdoor cafes. There is a very, very rich life. It should be explored. I don't have anything in the works right now outside of Vishniak on that level. I have a few films in the works on the feature film side, but we'll see how that how that goes. The dramatizations of On the Map and Above and Beyond. But I think it is important. I think it's important. Roberta Grossman's working on the story about Heschel. So that's another very important figure, Jewish figure. So, you know, I don't know. I may be doing this when I'm 80. Or at least we have to, you know, we'll gather in maybe with a film fund and make sure that we've got one from every column so that we can create and preserve stories from all walks of life.
So now we have another question. Besides your brother screaming at you what to do when you were small, did you have any formal training in filmmaking, or did you learn everything on the job? Did you go to the film school at UCLA or anything like that?
So first it was on the job training, but I was pretty young. But when he said, crawl toward the sun in the backyard and reach for it and stop blinking and making me stare in the sun, I did what he said. I saw spots for a long time. I took a lot of writing classes. I was really into writing. I wasn't into filmmaking. So a lot of I'm sort of a visual person, but a lot of my training is more in storytelling. And even though I'm blabbing forever here, the idea is sort of to move your story along a little quicker than I am doing. And I think at UCLA, I was a pre-vet. I was pre-vet major. And then I went to Sarah Lawrence when I moved to New York. I went to the New School. I just did writing classes, write. And I read a ton. And I think that helps in character development. And, you know, that's real important. I mean, everybody will say, what's the most important part of a movie? It's your story. It's your script first.
By the way, another interesting connection here. So obviously when Spielberg and Lucas and all this gang that changed Hollywood forever.
Right.
So obviously George Lucas did amazing things with his studio that you ended up working with on Above and Beyond, right? Industrial Light and Magic, right? Which
yeah, it was crazy though. But so Industrial Light and Magic does the best CGI, computer generated imaging. And I knew for Above and Beyond, I was going to have to recreate flying sequences. And if you recreate them with crappy computer imaging, you're going to look like a video game. And you just, you know, you screwed up your whole film. Everybody's going to go like, what? I was in this moment. And then the stupid fake plane flew across. But Kathy Kennedy, who worked for my brother and was producing with my brother forever, was the head of Lucasfilms. And so one night, I tell this story, I poured a really big glass of wine, I drank it, and then I typed her an email and I was like, I want ILM to do all my CGI work. I have no money to pay you. And they agreed to do it pro bono. I did end up paying a little because there was like some truck scene that they couldn't give me, but they did most of it pro bono. I was so excited, and I used it carefully so it wouldn't take away from the wonderful pilots who are really the secret sauce of Above and Beyond is listening to them talk. But yeah, again, it paid. Thank you, Steve and Kathy.
Oh, it's amazing. And it's great your contribution to all these causes. I mean, you're right that this is what our kids are going to watch, and telling the story the right way. And like they said in one of the trailers, do we want to let Germany tell our story, or should we? In some cases, right. Now, any project that that we should mention that I forgot here? Because they did many more.
Well, there's more coming. I mean, you know, I've got nothing better to do, right? Eat 4 bags of M&Ms. That's what I have to do after we're off. The development, it's a slow development. On the Map, we're doing that as a narrative, which is great basketball story. And Above and Beyond also as a narrative. So, but again, we will see whether those are episodic, like Netflix kinds of things, you know, where you go and you've got it broken down into, you know, a season of 4 or 5 or 10, but time will tell. We're working through that.
And by the way, the Corona caught you in the middle of projects, or you managed to get to move things along, I don't know, editing or stuff that you can do without human beings?
Well, it caught us with our pants down in some ways. I mean, we had Picture of His Life is another film, which we did, and I don't think I gave you the trailer, which is this incredible film about Amos Nahum, who is famous underwater photographer. He is Israeli, and he free swims with like great white sharks and polar bears, and well, he wanted to swim with polar bears, killer whales. He doesn't go in the cage, and his dream in life was to swim with polar bears. And he tried it once.
No protection.
What?
No protection.
No protection. No cages. Free swims. Anyway, his photographs are incredible. If you go on Facebook and you can look at Picture of His Life or Amos Nachum, and he went, I did not go, thank God. He went with Donnie Menken, the director, and Yonatan Nir, the co-director, to the Canadian Arctic. And they spent 5 days in search of polar bears so they could swim with them, with a group of Inuits that were guiding them. It's an incredible film. It is so much about preservation. So this is not a Jewish story. This is a story of a man who's sort of PTSD from the Yom Kippur War, and he finds solace and comfort swimming in the quiet under the waters, but with these creatures that we are also afraid of and that are dying out because we're killing them. So it's got a lot of messages in there. It's a wonderful film. So Picture of His Life and Osi, that film, were both opening festivals. They were opening night festivals at Jewish film festivals. We just started our festival runs, and we had such momentum, mostly with Osi, because Picture of His Life, we had already been doing it, and then bam, everything closed. And these festivals are our revenue streams. So you suddenly cut off all of our screening fees, and like with Who Wrote Our History, we have a foundation we have to support. So suddenly that's why we're all like scrambling to try and figure out, film festivals are canceled. Nobody's sitting in a room together. Can we book in November? Are we going to book? What else is happening? And we are in production with Vishniak. So parts of it, like we are rough editing. So we're doing a rough cut of the film. It'll be a rough, like 90 minutes. And then from there, we fine tune it. And we still have to film some dramatization. So we're trying to figure out whether we can get back to that in July.
You mentioned that he wanted to swim without protection. And there was this TV commercial that I remember until today where you see somebody jumping, skydiving, and somebody jumping from, and you see all that stuff going on, and then the camera goes, further, and then you see it's actually TV. Somebody's watching TV.
Right.
It goes backwards, and then you see pizza slices and cans of Coke, Coca-Cola and drinks and mess. And then you see this fat guy sitting like this, with his remote control, and then it says, "Do less, live longer." And I thought, you know what? I'm with you guys. I'm interviewing in 2 weeks Anoshe Ansari. She's the first woman to travel to space for 11 days. Now, I don't know how much you need to pay me to tell you that I cannot make it. My schedule doesn't allow me to travel to space. But amazing, some people. So maybe my last question for you is, how do you get all these ideas, all these stories? I mean, you read and then you say, oh, it's an interesting story, or people call you up and say, hey, this is something you probably would like.
It's a combination. Really, I feel blessed that some of the stories fell into my lap, and sometimes it is a little piece in a newspaper, or, somebody recently brought another story of a woman that helped evacuate 3,000 Syrian Jews. And she's a lady from Canada, Judy, I forgot her last name. But anyway, I was like, wow. I mean, this is a great story of this woman, that did all this stuff against the Syrian government to save Jews. I love that kind of stuff. Listen, my brother's very first feature-length film in theaters was Sugarland Express. Sugarland Express with Goldie Hawn in it he read a newspaper article, he clipped it out and just put it away and saved it. You never know. I do have people that share ideas, and unfortunately a lot of them I go, I can't do that, I can't do that. I do have a lot of people sharing Holocaust, and every single story is important and valuable. I just can't always do that. So, and sharing with other filmmakers that we collaborate together. When I'm producing, I'm sort of running the whole show. When I'm executive producing it, I am joined by others. Like one of my wonderful, wonderful executive producers is a man named Ori Eisen and his wife, Miri. They live in Scottsdale. He's been a huge supporter. And he gives me wonderful notes, and he really helps guide us. He financially helps us, creatively helps us. Another guy, Al Berg, was my angel with Above and Beyond and with Who Will Write Our History, as was Danny Abraham. So, you know, these are partners that we all share. So sometimes filmmakers bring the story, sometimes regular people in the email, I read it. It could be right in front of your nose, you know. If it does something to you, it may do something to someone else.
And the Holocaust stories, I mean, anyone here that's from Israel would tell you, you know, because every Holocaust day in Israel, we have just programs about the Holocaust, and I'm like 22. So every year, you know, you're just fascinated, like you just watch it for the first time. Every time you hear a different story, and you're just like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, crazy stories.
In Israel, Above and Beyond was shown there every Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut. For every Israel Independence and Day of Remembrance, they would show Above and Beyond on TV. And then the commander of the Air Force, not the current one, but Eshel, who was last one, he made it required viewing for all Israeli Air Force pilots. And sometimes we just need to know where we came from. And you need to hold on to that. And you have to honor the memories. So we don't go back to certain places, you know. So it's really is really quite emotional, really quite emotional.
We're very fortunate to have a family like yours, you, your brother, all the work you've done to preserve the stories. And as you say many times, or most times, it's not for profit, it's for the sake of the project, which is exciting. And again, like I like to say all the time, Nancy, we've been here for 1 hour and 20 minutes. And I always like to read the research that says that these calls usually last for 30 minutes. And when I bring an exciting, interesting person like you, we end up with a feature film. We just were here for 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Oh, God. So everybody needs a bathroom break now.
Thank you so much for this. I mean, if anybody would want to see how we can get involved in the amazing things Nancy does, let us know. I'll be happy to put you in touch. I will just say, anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I just say thank you for making me part of your family. I really do appreciate it. I think what you do is great. And I just started to listen to some of these. I mean, we're all new at this with Wendy, so I will stay tuned to more guests. And I appreciate everybody listening to me blab in my caffeinated fashion.
It was fascinating, I have to tell you. Fascinating, as expected. I will just tell everybody here that next week I'll be talking to, it's dedicated to technology. I'll be talking to two very interesting folks, Uri Levin, that founded Waze. He disrupts every sector he sees. He disrupts his neighbors. Anything that is disruptable, he's there. And you know what's nice? By the way, all the people I speak to, whether it's Silverstein family last week, you, Wendy Fetterman 2 days ago, that everybody don't need to work another single day, and none of them stops working for a second because they are driven by passion, and that's what's exciting. So Uri Levin. And then later that next week, I'll speak to Dov Moran that invented, the flash drives, everybody. And he sold that for $1.7 billion. And he kept on going and investing and charming person. I've been with him now on several conferences, got to know him. What a nice guy. And many more families, Saputo and others. And I will tell you something, you know, that you didn't ask, but I'll answer anyway. I grew up on, you know, I always need the positive things. You know, in the 80s, we had hard rock, but very positive one. You know, AC/DC and Guns N' Roses and all about believing in yourself. Then came grunge and told you life sucks, and then electronics. It was horrible. And I will be interviewing Guns N' Roses' drummer, who is a big investor in tech companies. Yeah. An amazing person that I grew up listening to. And he played with Velvet Underground, Alice Cooper, whom is my idol. So it's going to be fascinating. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here. We want to keep everybody strong during Corona days and listen to inspirational, exceptional people like yourself. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, stay safe.
You too.